In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King tells public security officers to ensure citizens' rights are protected while enforcing the law. The Prime Minister urges the Social Security Corporation to better manage investment to shore up growth. And Syrian refugees in Turkey fear a backlash after car bombings in a Turkish town. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news, and next are the details. His Majesty the King urged senior security officers to ensure citizens' rights while enforcing the rule of law in a firm and transparent way for the sake of democracy and reform in the kingdom. During a visit to the Public Security Department in which he met with its director, Lieutenant General Tawfiq al-Tawalbe, the King also reiterated the need to continue providing up-to-date and integrated police services across the country. His Majesty pointed out that the public security plays a key role by interacting with the local community and putting in place programs to deal with problems facing the society. The King expressed his pride and confidence in all personnel of the police force and their ability to effectively carry out their duties under all circumstances. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour said Social Security Corporation funds should be efficiently and prudently invested to prop up the economy through job-generating mega projects. In a meeting with the head and board members of the Commission's investment unit, Mansour emphasized the management of funds with the highest safety standards. He stressed a thorough, sound and feasible study of investment projects in order to minimize risk, stressing a balance between openness to investment and prudent management. Mansour said all indications point to a promising economic phase, urging the Social Security Corporation to help spur growth. He urged the investment unit to look into the feasibility of setting up a bank modeled on the Industrial Development Bank that offers loan services to the industrial and agricultural sector. He said such a bank should be managed along with commercial lines, but with a lower profit margin in order to shore up the Commission's revenues. During the meeting attended by a number of cabinet ministers, the investment unit's head, Henry Azam, gave a briefing on his entity's investments, assuring that measures taken by the Commission fit into international pension fund standards. He said the Social Security Fund's assets now stand at 5,831 million dinars. Azam said the fund's investments will focus on education, insurance and renewable energy sectors. Turkey's military said it lost one of its F-16 fighter jets near Osmani, about 50 kilometers from the border with Syria. A military source told a local television station that crash was probably an accident. Meanwhile, Syrian refugees in Turkey are fearing a backlash after deadly car bombings in Rihanli town, at Turkey's border with Syria. The bombings have raised fears that Syria's civil war is dragging in neighboring countries. Luaib Al-Qar has the story.
The twin car bomb explosions that struck a busy street in the Turkish border town of Rihanli have raised fears that Turkey could increasingly be drawn into Syria's brutal civil war. The blasts, which left up to 50 people dead, were one of the deadliest attacks in Turkey in recent years. Hundreds of people have gathered in the southern Turkish province of Hatay to protest against the bombings and called on the government to resign. Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey would not refrain from responding, but will act with caution and not be drawn into its neighbor's civil war. Erdogan added that blasts were not related to the Syrian opposition, dismissing rumors that Syrian rebels or refugees were involved. The acting president of the opposition Syrian National Council accused the Syrian government of having a hand in the bomb attacks.
Everybody can see the fingers of Syrian regime in what happened 2 days ago in Rihaniya and other places, not only in Turkey, but also in Lebanon and some other places. It's very clear this is part of the nature of Syrian regime. All countries in the region, all people in the region know exactly this fact.
Sabra added there would be repercussions to the attacks in Rihanli. A Turkish investigation revealed the bomb devices were illegally brought to Turkey area.
We have discovered that the materials were brought to Hatay by illegal means, and the cars were taken from there, and they were delivered to auto repairs on behalf of certain people. Disguised chambers were built into the cars in which to put the bombs, and a group of people who assisted them took those cars out of the auto repair depot and to the blast scene.
2 days after the attacks, rescuers pulled out 3 more bodies from the debris, bringing the total death toll to 49. Prayers echoed across the town, where many Turks gathered at the site after security forces raised blockades to allow them to mourn their loved ones. Despite a flurry of diplomatic activity aiming at the war, the battle for control in Syria raged across the country. Rebels bombarded a government forces camp near Aleppo as fighting persisted in various parts of the northern city. The violence also continued in the capital and in the city of Homs, where heavy bombardment damaged buildings and sent people running for shelter. A Syrian activist group now puts the death toll in Syria's civil war at 82,000, with almost 5,000 children being killed. The group said 12,500 people are missing after 2 years of violence. Luay Balqar for the news at 10.
US President Barack Obama and British Prime Minister David Cameron pledged their continued support for the people of Syria, including humanitarian aid and a push toward a transitional government to help bring peace. During a joint press conference after their talks in Washington, Obama said the United States would keep increasing pressure on the Syrian president to stop what he called the appalling violence. The British Prime Minister said he saw an urgent window of opportunity before worst fears in Syria would be realized, adding that Britain would double its non-lethal support to Syrian opposition forces in the coming year.
All sorts of stuff.
There you go. Together, we're going to continue our efforts to increase pressure on the Assad regime to provide humanitarian aid to the long-suffering Syrian people, to strengthen the moderate opposition, and to prepare for a democratic Syria without Bashar Assad. And that includes bringing together representatives of the region and the opposition in Geneva in the coming weeks to agree on a transitional body which would allow a transfer of power from Assad to this governing body. Meanwhile, we'll continue to work to establish the facts around the use of chemical weapons in Syria, and those facts will help guide our next steps.
We need to get Syrians to the table to agree a transitional government that can win the consent of all of the Syrian people. But there will be no political progress unless the opposition is able to withstand the onslaught and put pressure on Assad so he knows there is no military victory. So we will also increase our efforts to support and to shape the moderate opposition. Britain is pushing for more flexibility in the EU arms embargo, and we will double non-lethal support to the Syrian opposition in the coming year.
The Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, said any land swap with Israel could only take place after a complete Israeli withdrawal from all Palestinian lands occupied in 1967. The PLO's executive committee said after a meeting chaired by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that the proposed swap of about 2% of West Bank land could only take place as part of a final peace deal that guarantees the setting up of an independent Palestinian state. The meeting demanded a halt to land grabs and settlement activities in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Meanwhile, United Nations Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian lands, Richard Falk, urged Israel to immediately halt the building of a road in Arab East Jerusalem. Falk called on the Israeli Transport Ministry to issue an order to stop construction of the road in the Arab neighborhood of Beit Safafa, which, he said, will deny livelihood for more than 7,000 Palestinians. And security still fragile in post-Gaddafi Libya, while in Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif prepares to head a new government. But after the short break, stay tuned.
عن جد مع الغد الكل ربحان. اشترك أو جدد اشتراكك لمدة عامين لتقشر وتربح العديد من الجوائز.
A car bomb killed at least 3 people outside a hospital in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi. The bombing was a further sign of the violent disorder plaguing the country since the revolution. A doctor said the 3 deaths were confirmed, including a child, along with 17 injuries. Hundreds of angry people gathered at the scene, blaming armed groups for the explosion. They called for armed men to be driven from Benghazi, the cradle of the uprising that ended Muammar Gaddafi's iron rule. The blast damaged a dozen or more vehicles and shattered the windows of buildings nearby, sending a thick cloud of smoke in the sky and flinging dust several blocks away. Nawaz Sharif is set to become Prime Minister of Pakistan for a 3rd time after a decisive victory in Pakistan's elections. Sharif may not win enough seats to rule on his own, but he has made enough gains to avoid having to form a coalition with his main rivals, former cricketer Imran Khan's Tehreek Insaf and the Pakistan People's Party. Khaled Dababni has more.
Foreign observers gave Pakistan's landmark election a clean bill of health. They said the country's democratic progress was visible in Saturday's polls despite violence and procedural shortcomings. The results showed Nawaz Sharif's Pakistan Muslim League had secured 86 out of the 152 National Assembly seats, leading the elections by a big margin over its rivals. The European Union's election observer mission said in a statement that different parties have shown a strong commitment to the democratic process.
Firstly, I would like to say that we have assessed this election process to be competitive and improved despite militant violence and procedural shortcomings. Let me therefore highlight some of our key findings. 1. A strong commitment was shown to democracy by state authorities, parties, candidates and voters who continued to participate in the electoral process despite high level of militant attacks in different parts of the country.
However, violence distorted the election process in certain areas of the country. Minutes before polls were closed, the Election Commission issued a statement saying they had been unable to carry out free and fair elections in Karachi. In the city of Rawalpindi, police cleared a women's voting station 25 minutes before polls closed. The election was also disrupted in Karachi by bomb blasts, including one that targeted the office of a political party, killing 11 people and wounding about 40. The Pakistan Taliban, which regards the elections as un-Islamic, killed more than 120 people in attacks before the election in a bid to undermine the polls. In Quetta, the Inspector General of Police narrowly escaped a suicide attack that killed at least 6 people and wounded 46 others. As Nawaz Sharif looked set to form a government that would be less fragile than expected, Pakistan's stock market hit a record high.
We have witnessed a tremendous amount of upsurge in the market, crossing 20,000 points, which was a big price ceiling for us. And we believe that the market is doing well because the government which is going to come into power is not a coalition government.
As supporters of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif celebrated his triumphant comeback, Supporters of cricketer turned politician Imran Khan staged protests in Lahore and Karachi against what they saw as rigging of the polls. China, along with other world nations, congratulated Pakistan on its smooth general election and welcomed Sharif's comeback, pledging continued support to the country. Hala Dababne for the news at 10.
The Israeli cabinet finalized the annual budget amid public anger at government overspending on luxuries. Israel's Channel 10 television reported a $127,000 custom-built bedroom for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife on a flight to London last month. This year, there were reports that Netanyahu's office had an annual budget of $2,700 to buy his favorite flavors from a Jerusalem ice cream parlor. News of the expenditure caused an outcry on Israel's media that coincided with protests over government plans to raise taxes as part of an austerity budget. A meeting with defense officials last night produced a figure of $840 million to be cut from the defense budget.
We sat down yesterday until very late to discuss the...
A fighter jet crashed into a residential neighborhood in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. The remains of the pilots were amongst the plane's wreckage. Crowds gathered around a building that was damaged following the crash. A police officer at the scene said they evacuated the building and that there were no casualties amongst the residents.
We got into the building and there were no victims, thank God. We saved the situation.
Seems we're still facing some technical issues with the videos. River Plate, now in our sports outlook, River Plate kept pace with the leaders of the Argentine Championship after they beat All Boys 2-0 at the Monumental in Buenos Aires. Although All Boys' Dario Stefanato was sent off in the 29th minute, some fine goalkeeping by Nicolas Campiasso kept the game scoreless at the break. 5 minutes into the second half, River Plate broke the deadlock, Rogelio Funes more setting up Manuel Lanzini to score from the close range. Substitute Carlos Luna added a second in added time to seal a vital win for the home side. The win means that Ramon Diaz's side are in third place, 3 points behind new leaders Newell's Old Boys. Dutch cyclist Leeuw Westra raced to win the opening stage of the Tour of California, which started and ended in the city of Escondido. The Vacances Soleil DC team rider broke away from the pack with just under 5 kilometers to go in the 160-kilometer stage. Westra was joined by Spanish rider Francisco Mancebo of the 5-hour Energy Kender team in the closing corners, but Westra claimed the win by a couple of bicycle lengths. Stage 2 of the 8-stage Tour of California will be a 200-kilometer trek from the town of Murrieta to the resort city of Palm Springs.
We've got the winner. He will be the first wearer of the yellow jersey, and Peter Sagan cleaning up for third place.
The heat of the day, but this man will talk about the victory.
Now a look at the weather forecast. Unstable weather conditions with thundery showers tonight and southwesterly moderate to brisk winds blowing dust in the Badia. A slight drop in temperatures is in the forecast tomorrow, with local showers in the evening hours developing in various parts of the kingdom. Winds will be westerly moderate to brisk, blowing dust in the eastern desert region. There's also a chance for thundery showers tonight in Aqaba, with southerly moderate to brisk winds. Temperatures in Aqaba will be in the low 30s tomorrow, and seas will be choppy. The weatherman warns of poor visibility in the Badia region due to dust and also of flash floods in low-lying areas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To close, here is a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King tells public security officers to ensure citizens' rights are protected while enforcing the law. The Prime Minister urges the Social Security Corporation to better manage investment to shore up growth. And Syrian refugees in Turkey fear a backlash after deadly car bombings in a Turkish town. And that's the end of tonight's news. I am Raad Lapush. Thank you for watching and have a good night.